This R.J.etroFilms production of the Westward Quest is brought to you in part by the Muhlenberg College Experimental Learning Grant. Thank you. All of the music in today's video is credited at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Alright, here we go!
Only Atari makes the world's most popular home video games. The only Space Invaders. The only Asteroids. The only Pac-Man. The only Missile Command. And soon, the only Defender. And the only way you can play any of them is on a home video system made by Atari.
Oh, we're definitely going to be playing some Atari today. But first, the American West. The amount of times the West has been depicted in popular film is immense. But what about video games? Well, I'm happy to report that there's just a slew of games with Western iconography. But how much of it is true? Today, we're going to find out. But first, a little bit of gaming history. The early 80s saw the rapid success of Atari. More specifically, its video computer system, later shortened to the Atari 2600. That doesn't say it was happily ever after, though. Atari essentially had no quality control of its games. Third-party developers seemingly popped out of nowhere and released unlicensed games of extremely poor quality. This would eventually lead to an American video game market crash in 1983, but the short period before then is, funnily enough, dubbed the Wild West of video games by many. These circumstances created the environment for the first game we're looking at today to be produced, shipped, and sent out to various retailers. Yeah, I'm going to say it, this is one of the very first pornographic video games ever made. Just so happens it takes place in the American West. Let's discuss. The story of Custer's Revenge is a confusing one, but I'll try to keep it brief. Many claim that this game was made by a company called Mystique, but that's just a misconception. It was actually developed by American Multiple Industries, a company that decided that adult video games were an untapped market back in 1982 and wanted to take a crack at it. Mystique was a branding that they used for several other games too. Specifically, they say on the package that Mystique presents Swedish erotica, which, believe it or not, was a popular brand in the world of adult media. They essentially licensed the name to boost sales. As a fair warning, I just want to let you know that I will not be censoring this following game in any way. This is the Atari 2600 we're talking about, where the games look like this. Rest assured, there is nothing in this game that I would consider too sensitive for your eyes. But keep in mind that there is sensitive material and viewer discretion is advised. We're doing this for educational purposes only. Now, it gives me absolutely no pleasure to present to you in any way Custer's Revenge. Yeah, I'll be letting this gameplay speak for itself, but let's take a look around. You play as General George Armstrong Custer. Custer was an actual Civil War general and did some not-so-great things. He's known for his last stand at the Battle of Little Bighorn, years later, where he got sent into the Great Plains to go round up Native Americans and return them to their reservations. Little did he know that he was no match for the Indians, who outnumbered his battalion about 15-1, killing all his men and even Custer himself. Now at first, this may seem like a tragic story, but let's be honest with ourselves. Custer totally deserved it. We could be here all day discussing all the wrongdoings of Custer, but let's stick to the unfortunate topic of the game. The game technically has 4 modes, 2 of which are just multiplayer versions of the other 2. Out of respect, I didn't dare touch the multiplayer modes. Between you and me, I think the single player is bad enough. In single player, you're trying to make it to this Native American woman and rape her, avoiding what the manual calls arrows. If you get hit, you die. The manual says he grabs his bottoms and does a dance as a result of a lightning and thunder strike. Now I know I'm not some meteorologist by any means, but I'm pretty sure arrows don't equal lightning. It does have some religious connotations though. Lightning in the Bible is seen as arrows God shoots. I guess this is trying to emulate the battle itself. Even with such simple graphics, it's as stereotypical as ever, with a lone feather, or more accurately, a crude 3-pixel diagonal line on the Indian's head. There looks to be a teepee with smoke coming out in the background too. When you get to the target, you're supposed to mash the fire button on the Atari joystick, hoping to rack up as many points as you can. The famous charge sound even rears its ugly head. The origins of this 6-note melody aren't even from this time. It was written in California in the 1940s. I guess that makes it kinda Western, right? I must say, I found absolutely no joy in playing this. Despite the horrendous premise, this game isn't even fun to play. You essentially have 3 lives, represented by these, I don't know, man. What, cacti at the bottom of the screen? The second mode actually adds cacti as a new hazard. They'll just pop out of nowhere and disappear. If you manage to score 50 times, you gain an extra life and the game moves a lot faster. As with most Atari games, it's very simple. Now here's what we're all wondering. Did Custer actually rape a Native American? Well, unfortunately, yes. Before his last stand, Custer allegedly had sex with a member of the Cheyenne tribe named Monacita repeatedly in his tent. Some even believe that they had unofficially married. It's absolutely vile that America honors this man with statues and memorials. He's no hero. I think we've discussed this game long enough. Let's wrap it up. Custer's Revenge is simply a terrible game. I and many others consider it one of the worst ever made. Almost everyone found it extremely offensive upon release. Lots of news reports and newspaper articles showed a general outrage that a game like this was even sold. Native Americans are already an extremely marginalized group. They had their homes forcibly taken away from them, and many of them were massacred during America's colonization of the West. I will admit, the game itself is an extremely interesting relic of a time where games could be made and sold by anyone. But in short, it's a game that exemplifies the absolute worst of Western media. Alright, we did it. We played some Atari today, but I don't think anybody wants to know what we were playing. Why don't we move on to something a little more fun, shall we?
ファミリーコンピューターに光線銃登場。コントローラーを電子銃に持ち替えてワイルドガンマン西部のならず者相手にコンマ1秒の腕比べ。次にダックハント。一人はコントローラーでカモを操り、一人はハンター。そして圧巻だけを狙い撃つオーガンズアレイ。どのカセットも同じ電子銃で楽しめるファミリーコンピューター。
This is the Nintendo Famicom. In short, this is the Japanese version of the Nintendo Entertainment System. Thanks to Muhlenberg College, I'm able to show this off to you today. It's got a lot of differences compared to what we got in America. For one thing, the design is totally different. It uses different sized cartridges too. The controller wires are very short and are wired directly to the system. In Japan, you played a lot closer to the TV. The button layout is pretty much the same, but the second controller has a microphone on it. Some games, like The Legend of Zelda, have sections where you could shout into it to defeat enemies, but only in Japan. I must admit, hooking this thing up to any TV is a real pain here in America. Due to a general lack of info surrounding this, here's a quick tutorial if you decide to import one of these suckers. Japanese Famicom power supplies can run on American outlets, so if your adapter looks like this, try it. Unfortunately, mine is as dead as a doornail, but you can work around it if you have a North American Sega Genesis Model 1 power supply. Yeah, who knew? The Famicom only has RF out, so you'll need to directly hook it into your antenna in your TV to directly broadcast the signal to a channel. This is done using an RF switch. You can use one from an NES for better picture quality. The Famicom broadcasts on channel 1 or 2 in Japan, but in America, that translates to channels 95 and 96. After all that, you should be able to play some Famicom if you're lucky. Alright, I know that was a lot. The Famicom actually came out 2 years before the NES did in 1983. Sadly, back in America, the Wild West era of gaming was coming to a close, brought on by many poor quality games. Custer's Revenge. It would take Nintendo a while to market the Famicom, and eventually they would revitalize the North American game market. One of the ways they did this was by marketing it as a toy. Meet the NES Zapper, a futuristic light gun. America loves their guns, and bundling the Zapper in with the first models worked, and firmly put Nintendo in the American market. Now, what did Japan get, you may ask? Well, turns out in 1984, the Famicom got the gun. This beast is just what it looks like, a super realistic gun. Nintendo was no stranger to making toy guns. You can trace back their origins to the early 70s. The gun itself is based off of a Colt single-action Army, an iconic American West revolver. It was developed for the US Army in the 1870s and was the standard issue pistol for them for around 20 years. This gun is notorious for being in a million Wild West films, and it's a pretty popular piece of Americana, for better or for worse. In Japan, the gun only had 3 games, all made in-house by Nintendo. The gun plugs into this little port in front of the Famicom. Today, we're going to take a look at all the Famicom gun games. However, there's something I need to mention. You see, these light guns only work on old CRT TVs. When you fire the Famicom gun, the TV will black out the screen except for the target for 1 frame. The gun then detects if you're aiming at the white square. You need close to 0 input delay to make this work. Therefore, I gotta get the big one. All right, let's play. First up, we have Duck Hunt, a game that many of us are familiar with. It was packed in with Super Mario Bros. In the United States, but its origins can be traced back to here. The game can be described in 3 words. You shoot ducks. You shoot, shoot, shoot. When you miss one, the infamous Duck Hunt dog laughs at you. Why can't we shoot him? Duck hunting in the American West was normally done with a shotgun, but Native Americans had been hunting ducks in the Southwest with duck snares for years before we showed up. In fact, we hunted ducks so much, we practically made the wood duck extinct by the early 19th century. There's also a mode where you shoot 2 ducks at a time, a more realistic scenario, I suppose. If ducks aren't your thing, try clay shooting, where you need precision accuracy just to even get these things to break. Alright, what's next? Hogan's Alley is one of the most forgettable Nintendo franchises ever. You ever heard of it? I had, but that's because I'm a nerd. Let's see here. What shoot gangs only? Police, lady, professor? Lady? Professor? I don't know. The premise of this game involves a pretty lackluster shooting gallery where you're only supposed to shoot members of a gang. This raises more questions than answers. Why only these 3 gang members? Why are we even shooting them to begin with? In the Old West, there were a couple of gangs, but obviously this takes place a lot later, so I'm kinda at a loss for words here. The final mode is called Trick Shot, where you shoot the ever-living crap out of cans. You can kind of go ham with the gun here. Had to be careful not to break the darn thing. I don't even know if this game takes place in the West, to be completely honest. Next! So far, these gun games have been a bust. We only got one more, so let's hope we get something interesting. Well, it seems my wishes have been answered. This, my friends, is Wild Gunman. That definitely sounds more promising, doesn't it? This is a simple game, a classic Western shootout. It's you against 5 different gunmen. The American manual even lists them as wanted men. You've got a nicely dressed dude from the city, your standard cowboys, one with a whip and one without, a Mexican bandito, and a lanky fellow without a belt? Sadly, it's a stereotypical bunch of bandits. The people of the West were so much more varied than these fellas. Not to mention, all of them are male. Anyway, they'll walk up, yell fire, and whoever shoots first wins. After that, you get a different cowboy, and you basically do the same thing over and over until you run out of lives. If you fire before they say fire, the duel ends in a draw, and you lose a life. If you fail to fire in time, the screen goes crimson and the infamous funeral dirge plays, signifying your bitter end. It basically chalks up to be a test of your reaction time. Now, I don't happen to be the best at that sort of thing, but I did fairly well. Now, how often did these quick draw gunfights actually happen in the West? Well, not as much as this game, that's for sure. In fact, most Wild West era cities were a lot less dangerous than our modern day cities today. To have a quick draw in the middle of a town would have been quite literally a crisis. There's a real story of a Western officer, John Fitzhenry, who served 50 years in San Antonio and never had to shoot anyone. The fact that Wild Gunman is an endless sequence of these fights is highly inaccurate. Now, we all know that America loves its Wild West stories, but did you know that Japan loves the frontier as much as we do? In the 1960s and 70s, a new historical theory in Japan theorized that the American frontier was very similar to the development of ancient Japan, suggesting that there was actually an eastern frontier. Now, with that being said, did you know there's a mode where you can actually gun down 2 outlaws at once? Okay, now this is getting out of hand. The probability of this happening is just out of the question. Perhaps Japan loves the Wild West a little too much. Now's a good time as any to mention that the Famicom gun allows you to cock the hammer back and fire if you want. Pretty neat. If you hold down the trigger and fan the top, you can emulate what they do in the movies. You could buy this game in Japan with the gun included, along with a holster. I don't happen to own this, but if you keep the gun in your pocket, you can kinda act like it's holstered. The final mode in the game, which you select by firing the gun pointed away from the TV, by the way, is called Gang. Using a set number of bullets, you shoot endless waves of the same 5 outlaws from a saloon. Now, I'm not an expert in Wild West architecture, but I'm certain this could be classified as any building if you really wanted. Call it RJ's Wild West Saloon for all I care. Also, I find it pretty strange how you have 15 bullets each round. The Colt's single-action army could only hold 6 rounds at a time, and we all know how long it takes to reload these old guns. So those were the 3 gun games for the Famicom. I gotta admit, a lot more fun than Custer's Revenge. Now, using this gun to shoot down anything in my path was a little unsettling. I murdered millions of ducks. I slaughtered thousands of gunmen. And between you and me, I might have killed a professor or a policeman or 2. Nintendo is usually a very family-friendly company, and this was truly one of their last forays into making something that wasn't family-friendly and fun for all. Believe it or not, nowadays the Famicom gun characters live on in Super Smash Bros. In the Wii U version of the game, there's a trophy with all 5 Wild Gunmen. This is one of the only confirmations from Nintendo themselves, saying that they come from the Wild West. You can also battle as the Duck Hunt dog, having an entire stage based off his game. His moveset is based off all of the Famicom gun titles, and his down special cycles through all 5 gunmen. His final smash is perhaps the coolest of all these quirks, as it combines elements from all the games in a retro throwback. In Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, you can fight a spirit based on Wild Gunman, more specifically, the one on the Japanese box art. The Duck Hunt CPU is programmed to spam the gunman over and over again. It's a pretty hard fight. If you're one of the very few who still owns a Wii U, you can download Wild Gunman off the Nintendo eShop and play it through the Virtual Console service. But not for long. This digital shop will close for good on March 27th, 2023. Besides tracking down a Famicom or NES, this is the only official way to play this game. So get it now if you're interested. It's exactly the same game, but you use a Wii remote and cursor to shoot. You can also play this version on modern televisions. Alright, I hope you enjoyed our Famicom showcase. Now I'm really fired up. Let's take a look at our next pair of games.
It's in the air. It's an ill wind that blows no good. Mad Dog McCree and his band of cutthroats riding into town. Folks here plumb scared to death. Town's deserted.
Let's explore a genre of games rarely discussed today. I'm going to take you back to the early 90s, when playing a game from one of these babies was the coolest thing in the world. Back in the day, you could only do so much with a cartridge. They could only store so much data, and developers had to design games with this bottleneck in mind. That isn't to say cartridge-based games were bad, far from it. But the premise of storing games on optical media was an idea that many were waiting for. Eventually, we did get games on CDs, DVDs, and most recently Blu-rays, but before that revolution started, we got weird experiments. Let me introduce you to one of the craziest developers of the day, American Laser Games. These guys were absolutely insane. They decided to make games for Laserdisc. That's right, Laserdisc. This wasn't a new concept, but they were the first to really go all out. They accomplished this by making one of the first full-motion video games, or FMV games for short. These games dominated early CD-based systems, and essentially contained recorded video that you could interact with. Depending on what you did, a computer would tell the Laserdisc player where to go, and would play different scenes. There's debate if these games are even video games at all, but when I heard that their first outing was a game based in the Wild West, I just had to check it out. From this point on, you're about to be transported into the world of Mad Dog McCree. This game came out in arcades in 1990 and takes place in one of the most stereotypical Wild West towns ever. The game is similar to Wild Gunman, in which you use a gun to shoot down enemies, but as you'll see in a second, it's very different. This game came out for nearly every early disc-based platform under the sun, but today, I'll be playing an HD remaster of the game on the PlayStation 3. Using this PlayStation Move controller, combined with the PlayStation Eye camera, I can shoot down ruffians and also look like a complete loser while doing it. The game starts out looking over a bustling frontier town. You play as the Stranger, whose job it is to take down the notorious criminal Mad Dog McCree. The first person you meet is the Prospector, who explains that you need to get the keys to free the sheriff in the saloon. He gets attacked by some of Mad Dog's boys, but we take him out real easy. As a brief disclaimer, due to the nature of these games, I won't be providing commentary for every moment. The editing and acting in these games are extremely cheesy, so sit back, relax, and watch this literal madness, get it? Madness, play out. The first part of the game tasks you with going around this town, prepping to fight Mad Dog. Let's talk a little bit about these western towns in general. For one, in real life, they were a lot more crowded with buildings. These large open areas are simply a product of Hollywood, as filming is made much easier. Notice how there are practically no houses. I don't see any schools or churches either. Just a saloon, a bank, some hotel-looking buildings, and a couple of corrals and stables. Real western towns were very compact, with long wooden buildings in the town center. They were constantly being rebuilt due to things like fires. Other less important buildings were built on the edges. As towns developed with time, they became even more cramped and gloomy, as they simply served as a place for miners to sleep after working day in and day out. The hundreds of Wild West towns you see in films and some games like this one aren't incredibly realistic. I'm not terribly surprised that the game chose to show the town like this, but come on, man, they could have toned down everything at least a little. If Wild Gunman was a massacre, then this game is a bloodbath. You shoot so many people. What's comical is that every enemy dies of one bullet from a gun. You can aim essentially anywhere, and they fall over with such ease. Surely one bullet wound in, say, the arm or leg wouldn't kill you instantly, right? This game, unlike Wild Gunman, actually gets the number of bullets you can shoot down pat. 6 bullets, 6 shots. You even shake the controller to reload. Unfortunately, we still happen to die in one hit. And let me tell ya, this game ain't easy. In fact, one of the most entertaining parts of this game is when you die. No, really, I'm serious. Let me introduce you to my favorite character of the game, The Undertaker. This man is simply unhinged. Each time you die, you're greeted by this dude, and some of his lines are truly hilarious.
Well, I'd rather be lucky than good. You took a bad hit, but it looks like you're gonna pull through. That was a good woman you shot. Population 64. You better get lucky, or you're gonna be dead. You've only got one life left. You keep shooting the innocent people, and ain't gonna be none left to save. Looks like this good old boy's seen his last gunfight. Time to take him to Boot Hill.
If you lose all your lives, you can get them all back by winning a quick draw similar to Wild Gunman. Anyway, after you get the keys from the saloon, you free the sheriff, only for him to be shot like a minute later. After completing all the tasks in the town, you venture outside to find the prospector tied to a crap ton of TNT by Mad Dog. You even have to shoot the fuse to stop his untimely demise, which seems a little fishy. Is that even possible? For the fun of it, I just wanted to see what happened if I let him blow up. Damn! Talk about a way to go out. Mad Dog really sucks, doesn't he? Let's see how he compares to other notorious baddies of the West. I think Mad Dog himself is a little more extreme than the real criminals of the West. Take, for example, Billy the Kid, a notorious Wild West outlaw. To be completely honest, history paints this guy in a whole new light. In actuality, William H. Bonney, Billy's real name, had a troubled life. His father passed away when he was a baby, and his mother moved out west, kickstarting his murderous career. Or so you'd think. It's alleged that the first person he killed was because he was bullying him and beating him up. It may have been self-defense, but we'll never know. He did kill a bunch of people, which I'm definitely condoning, but not all of these outlaws are dynamite, gun-toting psychopaths like Mad Dog is. Exaggeration plays a big role in the notoriety of these people. Alright, we're so close to Mad Dog, I can feel it in the air. Let's take him down. So we come across a booby-trapped mine, which the prospector claims is for keeping claim jumpers away. A claim jumper is a person who mines another person's land. In order to deactivate all the traps, you have to shoot a bunch of random things in a very specific order, like a gold mining pan followed by a lantern. It's all very cryptic, but eventually I figured it out. The prospector then decides to test your skills, and this is quite possibly the funniest part of the game. If you fail to shoot the bottle, the prospector keeps repeating himself over and over again.
Nice shooting. Try another one. You missed that one. Try another. You missed that one. Try another. You missed that one. Try another.
You missed that one. Try another. After that ridiculousness, you make your way to Mad Dog's hideout, murdering at least 50 people on the way there. After you trudge your way through, you're left with a note asking you to meet him in town. You then again shoot a bunch more people. I mean, seriously, look at how many people I'm killing here. And then, all that's left is the final duel with Mad Dog. Unlike everyone else, he takes 2 hits to disarm.
You were one tough hombre to make it this far. The mayor's daughter's tied up in the feed and grain. Only one thing between you and her now. Mad Dog.
That's my turn, stranger.
It's all right, honey. We're saved. We're all saved. The stranger saved us. We're mighty beholden to you, stranger. It's all right now. We're all going to be okay.
I got a bad feeling. We're going to need you again, stranger.
So that's Mad Dog McCree. Overall, an extremely stereotypical Wild West shooter. Now, despite how funny this game was due to its acting, it was also super hard. It took me hours to get the footage for this video, and if you play this game perfectly, it's only 45 minutes long. Now, my theory is that in arcades, they made the difficulty sky high to gobble up your quarters. Now, as the ending of this game suggests, Mad Dog is still out there. We're not done with him. Oh no. Yeah, that's right. 2 years later in 1992, we got Mad Dog 2, The Lost Gold. They just didn't know when to stop, did they? Let's take a quick look. Before we begin, I just wanted to point out that both these games can still be downloaded from the PS3 PlayStation Store with a little bit of effort. You have to add money through a computer now, but I was able to download these games on a 16-year-old system with no problems. Props to Sony. Please don't shut down your digital stores like Nintendo is, I beg of you. I must admit, the budget for Mad Dog 2 must have been way higher here. We're not confined to a town anymore. Both games were actually filmed in New Mexico, but this one feels more like you're going out into an adventure, for better or for worse. This larger scope means that there's a lot more characters, and this is where it gets a little problematic. You see, this time Mad Dog is after some lost Spanish gold. Now, legend has it that Indians hid gold in the mountains of New Mexico after a skirmish with the Spanish, before we came. But there's no historical ties to this, it's simply a rumor. After shooting down about a dozen cronies, some really weird guy gives you the other half of the map and asks you to pick a guide. You can choose a raunchy woman, a crackpot professor, or a Native American. Now, it's been 10 years since Custer's Revenge. Let's see if the games industry has learned any lessons at all about their depictions of Native Americans in these games. Nope, not at all. Shooting Beaver is a terrible depiction of an Indian. You rescue him from some banditos who the game presents as complete savages, and then he decides to guide you through some tribal lands to the treasure, for saving him from being hung. What results is a series of screens where you quite literally shoot down his own kind. This section doesn't last long, and it's a shame they fell into so many inaccurate and offensive tropes. You actually meet back up with the prospector for the exciting stuff. You find the gold and ride a train, which is admittedly a pretty cool and well-shot part of the game. At this point, accuracy is out the window. I find it funny how Mad Dog just has an endless supply of men to shoot and kill you. They hide in trains, they pop out of horses. I mean, jeez. Now after all that, we can finally get the gold and I can be done with these games. Right? Ladies and gentlemen, here's the worst screen in Mad Dog history. It's a long panning shot where you can't die a single time. It's the last push to Mad Dog, and it's nearly impossible. There's so many cop-outs and surprise attacks, you basically have to memorize it and pray you can shoot everything. Hey, at least we get to visit the Undertaker again. He's even more of a hoot in this one.
Well, you got 2 lives left. Well, your history, partner. Didn't last long, did you? This was a good man. We may have to trim you up a bit, but we'll make you fit. I think you're going to have to put more money in this game.
After that's over, you face Mad Dog once again and claim the gold.
Enough! This is it, stranger. Go ahead. You're already a dead man.
Dirt! This is what I risked my bloody life for?
Dirt is gold, just part of the earth.
I had planned to do so much good with it. Now I guess I'll never get to see Rome.
How about Paris, Padre?
Oh, I say.
Who took it?
Well, don't look at me. My hands are clean. Mad Dog. Or maybe you should have played a better game.
That's it. I'm not playing these games anymore. The Mad Dog McCree franchise is a terrible set of inaccurate games. They simply add to the pile of films that present the fictionalized version of the West. You know, at least the first game had the decency to leave out the Mexicans and the Native Americans. You know, cheesy acting can't save these games from stereotyping the frontier. With that settled, let's move into the future about 10 years and see if we can find any games that can save these two.
Uncle make it back yet?
That old man can take care of himself.
I know. Just a funny feeling I got.
Jack, get out here!
I'm going to wander down that lonely, deserted street and get my bag.
I've never seen anything quite like this. Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare. Download on October 26th. Rated M for mature.
The Red Dead Redemption franchise is probably the most well-known series of games based on the American West. Its depictions of the earliest 20th century frontier are fairly accurate. You know, I gotta hand it to them. I've played a fair bit of this game, and I've been really impressed by it. You know, these games are really successful too, spawning an online spin-off, a full-blown sequel. But you know, what if I told you there was a part of the Red Dead franchise that put its historical accuracy in jeopardy? Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare came about as a result of Rockstar, the game's developer, wanting to make a zombie horror game. Instead of building a new game from scratch, they scoured their existing franchises to pick a candidate. They settled on Red Dead Redemption because they wondered what a zombie outbreak would do to an existing world they created, and sought to make a serious revisionist western based on 1970s horror movies. In 2010, their plan was a success, and Undead Nightmare was released as an add-on to the base game. How much history is still left? Well, I played through about half of the Undead Nightmare to find out. Let's discuss. As we start the game, we look into the life of John Marston, a jack-of-all-trades cowboy, outlaw, bounty hunter family man. As a historical aside, John was the most common male name in 1911, the same year this game supposedly takes place. John is a wisecracking protagonist, one who unsurprisingly has no idea what's going on when the outbreak begins. Unfortunately, he has to tie up his wife and child, who have been bitten by the zombies. Thinking this whole thing is some sort of sickness, he goes out in search of a doctor in the nearby town of Blackwater. Now I have to give Rockstar some credit here. These towns are a lot better looking compared to Mad Dog McCree. Blackwater actually looks like a well-developed, period-accurate western town. There are buildings of all different kinds with their own advertising, and it genuinely feels as if it's a place of the day. Now, of course, it's abandoned as a result of the zombie apocalypse, but I can imagine what it would look like before they came. As John walks around Blackwater, you discover a professor who teaches at Yale. Now, he's not a lady professor, but we'll give him a pass. Like John, he has no idea what's going on.
I haven't got a fucking clue.
I kind of like how nobody in this game knows about the zombies' origins. It makes the idea of a western town being overrun with zombies seem feasible. Obviously this can't happen in real life, but, for a guess, it works rather well. The few remaining people who do live in the towns that you discover are simply horrified at what's going on. Most of them are scared to fight back, and they worry if their families are even okay.
I just saw my daughter get eaten by some creature sent straight from hell. Thanks for asking.
Not John, though. Here we run into our first problem. John, as a protagonist, is out for some blood. This game is really violent. Of course, there has to be a way of eliminating the zombies in your path, and the game gives you all sorts of period-accurate guns to shoot them down. One of the major mechanics involves cleansing the undead from towns and cemeteries by killing them en masse. In the beginning, you get a torch as an additional weapon, and in a combination of shooting and burning, you kill hundreds of zombies and save the areas. What the heck? Where's everyone's heads? And arms? Oh god, what the heck is going on? Well, it turns out Undead Nightmare suffers from glitches. Yeah, if you play it on an Xbox One via backwards compatibility mode, you might be unable to progress the story. Good thing I can play it on my Xbox 360, no problem. Still gotta wait an eternity for the game to install, though. One of the biggest problems I have with this game are the killing of these zombies themselves. Now you may think, well, aren't they just blood-sucking vicious monsters? Well, let me explain. The game implies many times that these zombies are people who have been bitten. People who were more or less peacefully living in these towns. Many people lived in western towns. Women, children, African Americans, and so on. So essentially, every one of these zombies John kills is a real person in his world. He kind of suggests he wants to find a cure, mostly for his wife and kid, but he quite literally murders thousands of people. To make things worse, every corpse is searchable for items and ammo too. When I really think about it, it's kind of a comparison to the moving, and in some cases killing, of marginalized groups in the West. The zombies reinforce the idea that unwanted individuals are running amok. Stealing others' possessions after they are gone even reminds me of Japanese internment. For many years, people wanted to kill the Indian and save the man, and this game almost underhandedly supports this problematic thinking. This philosophy brings out the worst of the West in these games. By putting the player in control of John, this game transforms into a lesson of Western ethics. As the game progresses, you begin to travel around a large open world. Opening the map reveals what the game calls a map of the western border states. Later in the game, you supposedly go into Mexico, which from what I've heard has more zombies than the American part of the game, which is kind of racist, but I didn't make it that far. This game actually comes with a more detailed map printed in the box. Let's take a look. I'm pretty sure all the areas are made up, but I don't know. Maybe one of you can trace this back to some location in America? I'm not sure. A good chunk of the game involves traveling across the frontier with your trusty horse. This does a pretty fantastic job of making a believable and travelable open recreation of the West for you to explore. Just look at some of these areas. They're very well made. It sure adds to the realism, and thankfully they didn't turn it into a nightmare land or something. You'll see a zombie here or there, but it doesn't detract from the experience. John encounters a lot more people than just the professor. Why don't we quickly go through some of the people he meets? After you cleanse Blackwater of zombies, a bunch of survivors start putting blame on a number of individuals for the zombie invasion. With these leads, John visits a good number of them. There's a fort you visit where a man sells snake oil to cure the undead. In the actual West, snake oil was indeed sold. Some even traveled and sold it like this guy here. Good thing John doesn't believe in that stuff.
Patented tonic. The only 100% original, 200% guaranteed cure against the undead stalking this earth. You, sir! You look healthy. Would you like to give it a try?
Me, sir?
Yes, sir. Would you care to demonstrate the undead defeating possibilities of this patented elixir?
No, sir, I would not. What I would like is for you to stop peddling this nonsense right now.
There's a crazy guy with a glass eye who you run into, who is basically a white Southern stereotype.
Fancy a game of cards?
Not right this minute.
You remember Moses, John?
He's
a darn sight more loyal now than he was before. Come here, boy. Come on.
You meet a shopkeeper who blames the zombie invasion on literally every marginalized community ever. I think this is meant to be a joke, but as we've already discussed, this game has evidence to support that some groups are represented better than others.
What are you talking about?
Why? I bet you like Catholics. I can't stand them neither. Nor women. Fabians, socialists, homosexuals, Asians, or British. Between them, they've ruined this country. Ruined it. It was a good country once. Now people are eating each other, and it's all the fault of the Jewish, British, Catholic, homosexual elite and their ideas.
Lastly, there's a filmmaker who tasks you with collecting special types of zombies for a movie, where he essentially keeps them tied up and screaming while filming them. Okay?
I appreciate that, sir. Are you ready to watch the creation of magic?
If you say so.
Lovely, lovely. Oh, this is great. Movie-making history, my friend.
Perhaps the weirdest thing I experienced, besides the headless zombies of course, was the killing of Sasquatches in the northern part of the map. Yes, you heard me correctly. There's a mission where you have to kill 5 Sasquatches in a snowy forest. Already weird, right? Well, it gets weirder. The Sasquatches start talking to you. I'm sorry, what? Believe it or not, it's actually the saddest moment of the game, and has some parallels to the treatment of Native Americans. It begs John to kill him and end his suffering, as his family and his kind are gone. He explains that they've lived on these hills for 1,000 years, and that one day someone started killing his kind. The mission ends with the choice of killing him or leaving him there, crying underneath a tree.
The last of my kind. We've lived in these hills 1,000 years.
You eat babies.
If you say so, human. My family is gone. My kind is gone. Shoot me. I can't take it anymore. Make it stop.
If only Rockstar was bold enough to use something other than a literal Sasquatch to make such an impact. The more I think about it, the more bizarre it becomes. And it's kind of offensive. After doing tons of missions and playing for hours on end, eventually I decided to put the game down. I was getting pretty bored and was tired of mindlessly killing zombies over and over again. As you can see, Undead Nightmare is kind of a mixed bag. I think in general, the game stays true to its historical accuracy and its locations established in the original Red Dead Redemption. But the main problem I have is the zombies you're killing and all the other people you're interacting with. Rockstar didn't need to make Red Dead Redemption a zombie game. They could have easily made their own zombie game from scratch, but they used the West as a platform. And it's kind of weird. We looked at a number of games today. Some were fun but inaccurate, others were just flat out miserable, and others were just a strange melding of the two. Let's discuss. Games based on the American West are fascinating. Compared to other historical topics, there's a lot more of them. Here's a list of what's thought to be every game based on the West before 2016. It's a staggering amount overall. At the same time, however, I find that they turn out to be collectively less accurate as a whole. They all have some sort of fantasized version of the West embedded within them, and sadly, a lot of the interesting history is replaced with guns, violence, and shooting. As much as I hate it, Custer's Revenge turned out to be the only game we covered today without a gun. That doesn't excuse its unforgivable portrayal of Native Americans, though. Wild Gunman was created solely based on the need to shoot things with a gun. It shows how America isn't the only country with an obsession with the Wild West. Mad Dog McCree entertains an interesting notion about Western movies and the differences they have with gaming. In a movie, someone else kills the outlaw. In a video game, you kill them yourself. That idea is what makes inaccurate video games worse than inaccurate movies as a whole. That's why Undead Nightmare is an unsettling experience at times. As video games get more realistic with time, so does the guilt of killing innocent people. Behind the facade of a zombie, who are you killing? Perhaps I'm being a little too philosophical, but games of the American West are strange in that regard. If you want to start playing games based on the West for yourself, you'll have no problem finding them. Might I recommend the re-release of the Oregon Trail for the Nintendo Switch? They actually consulted with real historians and researchers who promised to make Native Americans have a bigger role in the game. It seems the more we complain, the more things get done. It's up to us, the players, to make sure that these games are accurate in their depictions of the marvelous American West.